I do think talking about it makes other people aware. And if there is already people who are probably listening to this podcast, or people that maybe even older than us, especially in my culture and my religion, that haven't come forward, it is okay to come forward. It is okay to break your silence, not still be sitting in fear, because the only person you're ultimately damaging and hurting is yourself. What about teaching men how to treat women properly, to treat women with respect, to know their boundaries of when it's okay to either ask a woman out or to step back and be like, okay, no means no. And I can openly say this and confidently say this, that I'm probably not the first person he's done that to. And until he gets stopped, I won't be the last. There is still a lot of stigma, and it's taboo in our culture and religion to talk about these things. It's like either you don't say anything and you suffer for the rest of your life, or you talk about it and they're like, okay, you've spoken about it, you can't tell anyone else now because they'll judge you, they'll have this thought of you, they'll think of like this of you. And it's like, no, you doesn't matter. This is not how a society works anymore. You have to move with times.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Be Brave Project podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that today's episode contains discussion of sexual assault and sexual abuse, as well as the role that faith, religion, and culture can play in silencing survivors. Please take care of yourself whilst listening. Pause, step away if you need to. While this podcast often focuses on child sexual abuse, today's conversation centres on sexual assault and sexual abuse in adulthood. It's important to say that this clearly. The harm does not become smaller because the survivor is an adult. What often changes is how silence is enforced. Today's episode is about that silence, where it comes from, who it protects, and what it costs survivors. I am joined by Anjali, is 36. She lives outside of London and works in healthcare. She's someone who understands care, responsibility, and resilience. And she's here today to speak about her experience and the impact of silence within faith and cultural contexts. So Anjali, hi, and thank you so much for being here and trusting the space and trusting me to come on and tell your story. Hello, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share my story, and, that to say that whilst it's not okay for these things to happen, you shouldn't have to sit in silence, and you should be able to speak about it without being in fear. There's a lot of women out there, especially today, who unfortunately, some might not get believed, some are too scared to speak, and they end up having trust issues with men within themselves and their relationships further down the line as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So before we begin and before we go any further, I want to say that you are 100% in control of this conversation today. You can pause, you can skip a question or stop any time that you want. And if you're able to, I'd like to start by asking if you can, with the listeners that are listening right now, share your story of what happened in your own words and at your own pace.
So back in 2021, I was actually invited to a school friend's wedding of mine, and we'd been friends from reception age, so about 3 or 4 years old. So I'd known her and her family my whole life, and we were very good friends. And I remember being invited to her wedding and being so excited because to this day, she was one of my oldest friends. And, when you create friendships like that, they tend to mostly last lifetimes. So I remember on this specific time, so her wedding was actually down south coast somewhere. I can't remember a specific location. And we all went down on the Friday night because there was a wedding rehearsal, and then we went out for dinner, we had a few drinks, etc., etc. So I remember sharing a room with the bride, another bridesmaid, and myself. And there were three of us in this room. And we were having a really nice evening on Friday. And then on Saturday morning, because I was just part of the main wedding party, so I wasn't a bridesmaid or anything, the bridesmaid and the bride left to go to the venue around maybe 6:30, 7 in the morning, because they had to get ready, have hair and makeup done, etc., etc. So the dad took them down to the venue and then came back. And then it was probably around 7:30. I heard a knock on my door. We were all staying in a hotel. And I didn't think much of it. So I thought, oh, maybe it's one of the girls. They might have forgotten something. So I opened the door and it was the friend's dad standing outside the door. Bearing in mind I'd only just woken up, so I was quite, like, zoned out and dazed. He proceeded to push open the door. He then pushed me onto the bed and continued to do whatever he thought was okay to do. Obviously, I didn't consent to any of this, and then I quickly ran into the bathroom, and I was like, "I'll be out in a minute," and I said, "Go and wait outside, and I'll meet you," because there was a massive wedding party. So I was like, "I'll meet you guys afterwards." So I was obviously just in my pajamas and he decided to undress me and touch me inappropriately in places in my body that I did not consent to. I obviously felt very let down because it was someone I knew and trusted as well, someone my parents knew and trusted. And in that moment, you don't really know what to do, so you freeze. So I just froze for a minute and I was like, did this just happen? And, even I did attend the wedding because it was a very good friend of mine. And I just sat with my own thoughts. And for some reason, I was on the head table with the bride and the groom on the day of the wedding. So it made matters a lot worse because he was literally sitting opposite me. And I remember being like, firstly, you normally have members of your family sitting at the head table. And I just remember him being forceful. I remember him saying, "Oh, but this just stays between us. There's nothing wrong here." Whilst, yes, I was an adult, that's still not okay. If someone has not consented to whether it be just kissing, to whether it be being touched in your body, that is sexual assault, that is rape, and that's not okay.
Absolutely. No, it is not okay. What happened to you should not have happened. What happened to you was not okay, was not right. And I'm so sorry that it happened to you. And it makes me so freaking angry. It makes me so angry. And I'm just so sorry because you were completely vulnerable in that situation. And what you said, you freeze and you go into fight flight and your body chooses to survive. And the only way that we know how to survive in that moment is to just freeze and just go, okay, I don't want this to happen. But I think so many people say as well, why did you not stop it? Why did you not do this? What? Because when you're in that moment, you cannot stop it because you need to survive. And the only way that you need how to survive is just freezing. It's a very scary place to be. And I'm very sorry it happened to you, Anjali. Really, I am. It shouldn't have happened. Thank you for sharing that. I want to gently name something here for listeners as well, because I think there's a common assumption that when sexual assault or sexual abuse or rape happens in adulthood, survivors should be more equipped to cope. And I think going back to that kind of freeze moment where when you're an adult, you should be able to deal with it and that you can handle it better, you can recover faster, you can stay quiet, you can just swallow it and deal with it. But I don't agree with that. And abuse doesn't lose its impact because of age. And silence doesn't become easier when someone's an adult or someone grows. It's when someone is grown. It doesn't. And I'm sure that there's not many people that believe that, but I just think it's really important to just reiterate it because when we talk about child sexual abuse, you're a child and you're so vulnerable and innocent and small, but it doesn't matter. Even when you're an adult and things like this happen to you, you become vulnerable and small and you cannot do anything. And it's a very similar crossover, I think, even when you're an adult, it doesn't matter. And these men, obviously, and women, but mostly men that commit these crimes, they're stronger, they're bigger, anyway.
I think when it comes to men like that, they feel like they're powerful and they have that power and control over us. And for them, they deem it to be okay when no, it's not. And actually, if you were to look at these men, they probably have a lot of insecurities within themselves or things in their life that's gone very wrong for them to then project the way that they do onto people like us.
Yeah, 100%. It's their issue, isn't it? It's their problem. It's not ours. Thank you again. Thank you for sharing. Are you happy to move on to the next sort of couple of questions, or do you want to touch on anything a little bit more? Or
No, I just think I just want to reiterate, and how you're doing this podcast, and we're trying to bring it something to talk about, that you shouldn't be scared of these men. Whenever it happens, whatever it happens, however big, however small, go and talk to someone. Your voice should be heard.
yeah, and your voice matters, and there'll be people out there that will believe you, and I think that's absolutely incredibly important. So I kind of want to touch on and going on to the faith culture and the silence around that. So many survivors describe silence not as a choice, but something that's taught, especially. And I think that's generalizing. I don't think that just comes down to faith and culture. I think as a society, we are told to or taught to be quiet and not say things in case we say the wrong thing and all of that sort of stuff. So I think it's embedded in us from a very early age, but especially when it comes to faith and culture communities. And if you're comfortable with and you want to, I would like to ask you, how did faith and culture expectations shape what you felt you were able to say or not say after what happened to you?
I think when my experience specifically happened, it's a very trying time for anyone that goes through that experience. However, what I will say is my parents are quite modern in their mindset. So, in that respect, I didn't feel like I couldn't talk to them openly about it, which is, a lot of Asian girls don't have that. There is still a lot of stigma, and it's taboo in our culture and religion to talk about these things. It's like either you don't say anything and you suffer for the rest of your life, or you talk about it and they're like, okay, you've spoken about it. You can't tell anyone else now because they'll judge you. They'll have this thought of you. They'll think like this of you. And it's like, no, you doesn't matter. This is not how a society works anymore. You have to move with times. I know someone today, and funnily enough, she's a cousin from my dad's side. And something like this happened to her, and till today, she hasn't told anyone. And I'm like, "Why are you suffering on your own? Even if you don't wanna tell your sibling or your parents." She told me, and then I said to her, "Look, I went to the police. I stepped forward because it was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
These men have to be stopped before they go any further." But going back to the religion aspect of it, yeah, I see there's a group that I'm on Facebook called Recommended Asian, and there are so many people, even women in their 40s and 50s, till today asking, "This has happened to me. How do I break this to my family?" Why are you caring what their opinion is of you? If it's happened to you, you deal with it hands on. You deal with it in a way that is right for you. Why are you caring about what society think? You do not live for society, you live for yourself. And I feel like this is very much where Asian women specifically are going wrong. And that's because from our great grandparents, our grandparents' generation, things were always brushed under the carpet. They were never openly spoken about. And that doesn't just apply to stuff like this, that applies to also baby loss as well. And I mean, going off the subject for 1 second,
Mhm.
I remember when I lost my first child back in 2015, my ex-mother-in-law, literally a few days later, she was like, "Okay, it's happened now, move on." You don't do that. Someone's just lost their child and you're telling them to move on. Just because your generation experienced that doesn't mean our generation will.
It's embedded in them, isn't it? It's something that has been I don't think it is just necessarily Asian culture. I think there's definitely just a culture and a generational culture in society, because look back at sort of when my grandparents were in the 50s. My nan got divorced, and oh my goodness, she was then like, oh, she's on the shelf, like we can't touch her, and she was only in her 30s, and you think, oh my goodness. And I think that's just the way our generations have happened. And I think especially now people are getting better, definitely. But I've spoken to a lot of survivors that are in their 60s and 70s that have only just broken their silence because of possibly their age and their parents and their generation. It was a taboo thing to do. Child sexual abuse is still a taboo subject. People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to think about rape. And again, very similar to what you like, baby loss. It's we don't want to sort of touch on it, and miscarriages and all. Yeah, there's still so many stigmas around so many topics and subjects. And I know we are talking about faith and culture, and I think there's obviously definitely more with that, but it is also, I think, a generational thing. But that is horrific what your ex-mother-in-law said. I've never experienced baby loss, but I can obviously sympathize with every woman or parent that has. And I can't even imagine that if someone said to me, oh, you just get over it like after a few days. I'm sorry. No, no.
Like, go through that process, feeling, and you do have, they say there's that circle of anger, resentment, and
Isn't it? The circle of grief.
yeah, and each person, it takes them however long it takes them to either not overcome it necessarily, but deal with the new normal. And that is okay. Like, you shouldn't have to go at someone else's speed because they said, okay, by this date, you have to overcome it and move on and go to something else. It doesn't work like that. And society is wrong, especially Asian society, for saying stuff like this. You should let the person grieve the way they want to grieve. You should let them process their emotions the way they want to process their emotions. And then when they're ready to talk about it or ready to deal with it, then you should be there to listen. And don't judge them until you have stepped in their shoes.
Why do you think specifically Asian culture is the way that it is? Do you think it's more because of your religion, or do you think it's more to do with the actual culture? And what is the reason, do you think?
I think a lot of it is to do with the actual culture itself. I think a lot of it is ignorance, and it's people not wanting to see the truth. And they think that if you just brush it under the carpet, if you just say, no, don't speak about it, it's okay, you move on. But then they don't realize actually the person they're saying that to, how much hurt that causes to that one person, how much sadness and anger and just isolation it gives to that one person. Like, I remember when in both scenarios when it happened to me, like, I felt very isolated because I was like, but I'm trying to openly explain here how I'm feeling. And
Mhm.
it's, you're saying to me, don't talk about it. Doesn't work.
No. So when you did open up about it and you said that, both your parents are quite modern in the way that they think, and they were very supportive of you. Was there anyone that wasn't? Like, how did you address what had happened to you? What did you do?
So I remember the first person I actually told about it was my best friend. And I remember having a conversation with her and I said, look, I'm not sure how to say this. I don't know whether I should say this, but I was obviously stuck in limbo. I was frightened and I was processing all those emotions that you've probably processed yourself already. And I had a very frank conversation with her. And obviously she had a million and one questions going through her head, sorry. And, she also said to me, well, why didn't you call someone? Why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you shout? And it's like, actually, in that moment, freeze, you can't do anything because you're trying to figure out what is going on. And it's a very scary place to be in. And then eventually, when I did tell her fully what happened, she was like, you need to go to the police. So I did go to the police. I went and gave a statement. And then there were interviews, that I'm sure again, the whole process that has to be recorded. You have to give your evidence, vice versa. And I remember because they contacted me on the day he was meant to go in for questioning, he didn't turn up. So I think it was the next day or a couple of days later, he was like, well, I'm not going in until I've got a lawyer. I haven't done anything wrong. And it's like, how do you live with your own conscience knowing what you've done?
Do you think that on some level, these perpetrators don't think they've done anything wrong? I think there's an element of they don't think what they've done is wrong. They're wondering what the hell. I don't know. Obviously, I'm just assuming from my perpetrator, he's never admitted what he's done, and he's in prison right now, but he hasn't done any of the programs that they set out for people like him to do. And he's very much, I didn't do anything wrong. He's got no remorse whatsoever. And I think there are a lot of perpetrators and a lot of men out there that genuinely don't think they've done anything wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think on some level that he's just, it was my right? And I think a lot of these men as well, they think it's their right to do what they do to women. And do you think there's maybe an element of that he just didn't think he did anything wrong because he genuinely believes that what he did was okay?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do think there is an element of that. He's very overly familiar, and I can openly say this and confidently say this, that I'm probably not the first person he's done that to. And until he gets stopped, I won't be the last. And I think it is very sad that in some ways I actually feel sorry for the perpetrators, because they must have had to have led a very sad, lonely life to be
Yeah.
the way they are today.
That's a good way of framing it, feeling sorry for them. I think that's very brave to do that. It's a hard place to get to feel like that for them. But I think it's reframing it and feeling sorry for them is a really great way of, I've never really looked at it like that actually. And actually, yeah, feel sorry for them because they're pathetic and disgusting, and what a sad life they must lead to want to do that. But so in terms of, you're saying that you just said until he gets stopped. So I'm assuming it didn't go, did it go, when you went to the police and gave your statements, then what happened?
So I remember giving my statements. I remember still feeling really frightened. I was like, what if because he knew where I worked.
Mhm.
Uh, his daughter and me went to the same primary school. So we lived in a very close vicinity. And I was like, what if I see him after this? Which obviously I was bound to because we live in the same village. And each time I went to work, I felt sick. I thought I'm going to be sick. And I remember seeing him not even maybe a week after, because I worked in healthcare. And I thought, how can you walk around with a smile on your face? Do you not feel disgusted by what you've done? Do you not feel disgusted that you've done that to your daughter's friend? Do you not feel disgusted that not even that? Forget for a second what he did to me was bad enough. But on the morning of his daughter's wedding, and I mean, his daughter knows about it now because I said to her, look, she was obviously a very good friend of mine. Unfortunately, we no longer speak due to this situation. He'd sent me threads of messages which were inappropriate messages. I showed them to her when I told her what had happened. And, I do feel sorry for her because genuinely she was a very nice girl who just had a really stupid father. And ultimately, that on that day, he didn't ruin just my life. He ruined his daughter's wedding. So forevermore, whenever she thinks of her wedding anniversary, that's all she's probably gonna maybe
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, they do. They ruin everyone's. That's the thing. You're so right. It's obviously, it is the main person that they ruin. It's the victims, but it's how it then, it's a spiral effect and it affects absolutely everyone around you. And that's one thing, touching on that, I really want to get across in this podcast as well is, and when it comes to child sexual abuse or any kind of abuse, any kind of assault, what people, I think I really want people to remember and understand is that it affects everyone. It affects the whole community. When a perpetrator does something like this, it's not just the victim that they're affecting. Obviously, the victim it happened to them, but the aftermath of what happened, it affects everyone because it's the family. Then it's how it's affected your mum and dad, how it's affected your friendship. You now no longer have that friendship. It's probably affected he was married, I'm assuming. So what's happened with his wife and his daughter, how to like think about her dad doing that. And like you said, going back from thinking about her wedding day, and it's all of that. It's a massive impact, and it ruins lives, not one life, it ruins lives. And it's just makes me, oh, it does make me so angry how I want to say again, I'm just so sorry that you've been through this. And it makes me angry that you were going to work and he was walking around, and the police, did they protect you in any way? Did they do anything? Is he allowed to, did they get like a restraining order, or what was the situation?
So they I was protected. I think he was not allowed anywhere in a few hundred meters of me or anywhere near me. He wasn't allowed to come into my workspace anymore. But ultimately, I think that he was just able to walk scot-free, and I think that is the most hardest thing.
Mm.
Knowing what he's done and knowing what his character was like, that they didn't take it further in the sense that because there was not enough evidence. And I think that is very sad because then you wonder, especially in our generation of today's society, yes, we're doing these podcasts. Yes, we're trying to make it known that it's okay to speak about these things. But then, you don't get believed sometimes. But also, how long does it take for him to get caught?
Yeah, how many more times does he have to do what he's done? And you were saying, you can imagine he's probably done this to other people as well. So I could talk about the justice system and all of that for hours because it's something that really angers me. And yeah, doing this podcast and having social media platforms and stuff to give the confidence to people like us to come forward. But there is always that element of doubt within you to think, are people going to believe me? Is it going to get taken further? Is there any point to do this? I think there are obviously a lot of people that do come forward and it doesn't go anywhere, but then there are a lot of people that it does. And I think I don't want that to be people that are listening to go, there's no point, because there is. And I still think it's very important for your healing and for what's happened to you to speak out, because that's ultimately the most brave thing that you could possibly do, is to come forward and tell that, even if it's just one person. It's so unbelievably brave. And then to then go to the police, it's a healing for you. And I don't want to assume, and I can imagine it's so difficult knowing that he's still out there and he's doing what he's doing. But have you been able to, I suppose my next question would be, what's your healing journey since it's happened? Have you managed to heal in any way? Because at the end of the day, it's about you and how you're doing.
I would say the one thing that I would tell anybody out there is go to therapy, because therapy is a very safe space. It's just you and your therapist there, and there is no judgment. There's no, I'm just going to take your side because I'm more biased towards you. You have to look at it as a whole subject and guide that person in the right way. Like, therapy has been the one thing for me personally when I started it, that it gave me a safe space. It gave me a space where I was able to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about, however I wanted to talk about it. Another thing, and this is just me personally, that I have sworn by for so many years, is writing your feelings down onto a piece of paper. Because again, it is just you, that pen and paper. No one else is going to see it. No one else is going to read it. And it is so important to always express and openly talk about how you feel. Because if you don't, at the end of the day, the only person you're actually harming is yourself, because you're holding all these feelings inside, all these thoughts, all these anger, frustration, resentment. And eventually, after a while, it builds up, and one day someone will come to blow. Whether that's you, whether that's me, it happens. And that's how I deal with stuff. I mean, it's different for everyone. What works for me might not necessarily work for you. What works for you might not necessarily work for me. But I do think it is important to always have one person or someone in your close circle who you can tell most things to. Doesn't have to be everything, because no one wants to always share everything, and that's fine. You don't have to. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to keep or please nothing. But it's always good to have someone who fully understands you.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. It's having that someone close to you, doesn't matter who it is. And I know not everyone has that. And then if you don't, trying to find somewhere else that you can go to, like therapy, like journaling, lots and lots of it. I did an episode a couple of weeks ago and it was all on different therapies and different help techniques and stuff, it's a really great episode on lots of different things that you can try and you can do to help with your healing process. Therapy is not for everyone. I found it the most incredible thing. I have healed so much since having therapy. It's taken a long time. It's not a quick fix. And another call that I did last night, it was about healing isn't linear and how you can go through all these different stages of your healing process. But sometimes you'll go back to the first stage or you'll go back to the second stage. And it's a beautiful muddle of just constant working on yourself, and don't feel pressure to suddenly feel okay, because you have good days and you have bad days.
I think if there's just something I want to add to that, if I may.
Of
The
course.
one thing that I will say is time is the biggest healer. It's not anything like this does never happen overnight. It takes weeks, it takes months, it can even take years. And that's okay. It is okay for one person to be on their journey, however long it takes them to heal. There is no right or wrong.
Yeah. Everyone's different as well. And what if something has happened to you and you're listening today and something has happened to you and you haven't got to that point yet where you have told anyone, don't feel the pressure to do that. You have to do it in your own time. You have to be ready. And I think another thing with healing is, I look back before I came forward to the police in 2017. Before that, sort of around, I think 2015, I'd gone to therapy, but I didn't continue. I didn't like it. I wasn't ready. And I always remember thinking, why did I not continue? I wasn't ready to do it. And there was another, I think I tried it again, another time. Again, I wasn't ready, didn't enjoy it, didn't continue. And I think that's also okay, knowing that you might try something and then think, no, I don't want to do it. And then try again and no, I don't want to do it. That's okay. You will find your path and you'll find where you need to go. And like you were saying, some people it will take a few months, some people it will take years, and sometimes it would take forever. And I don't think that I will ever be okay with what happened to me. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be part of who I am. It's just dealing with it and being able to process it and understand it. And I think the processing is the massive part of what happened to me as well. And I think a lot of people, you don't process what happened, and until you do, you suddenly think, oh, okay. Yeah. And everyone's healing journey is completely different, and just don't put pressure on yourself and just.
No, and I also think, going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, women live in fear of today's world, especially in England, in London. And people always have this view of, well, women shouldn't dress like that. That's what draws them attention. What about teaching men how to treat women properly, to treat women with respect, to know their boundaries of when it's okay to either ask a woman out or to step back and be like, okay, no means no. Where is that respect? Why can't men in this society be taught to not overstep the mark with boundaries?
I think that's the main word that you use there, is taught. And I think a lot of these men, and we're generalizing, it's not all men, we know that, but the men that haven't been taught are the ones that then go and do what they do. And it's putting it into their brains very early on. And women as well, I think is something that's probably gone out the window for our generation, definitely. And I think that's a whole new other topic that we could go on about. I could go on about that for a very long time. But I want to be very cautious that we want to stick to what we're talking about, and that the faith and the religion and the culture. And I think we have touched on that. One thing that I would like to ask, and again, only if you feel comfortable answering it, is if you could give someone from the Asian community a piece of advice on opening up or speaking out, what would you give them? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think that I would say to them, no matter how you're feeling with the situation, however scared you are, go and tell a trusted adult, even in a child, whether that is your teacher, whether that's an aunt, whether that's a friend's parent, anyone you trust and you know that can hold your trust in that space, go and tell them, because it is not worth sitting silent and then suffering with mental health. It is not worth it. And be your own person. Don't hold back your fears of opening up or talking about it because of past generations. Yes, their views should be heard and listened to, But if you don't feel that that's how you want to deal with the situation, deal with it in a way that feels right to you. We come from a generation that are trying to break all these curses of taboo and things that for so long ago haven't been spoken about, that it should be known.
Yeah. In terms of, say, for instance, there's someone in the Asian community or that is part of a religion that is always told to be, can't speak, to stay silent. We're talking about how that culture is often very much told to not talk about it, to brush it under the carpet. So if someone does come forward and disclose something, and that trusted person, whoever it may be, says, "Oh no, we don't talk about it," very similar to what your ex-mother-in-law did with baby loss. That's we don't talk about it now. How would you deal with that, and what kind of advice would you give to someone? Because I'm sure it's probably happened to you, even though your parents were very supportive and open, but did you have any other family members that didn't want to talk about it, brush it under the carpet? And if so, how did you deal with that, and what kind of advice would you give to someone?
I come from a very, very big family. So I don't think there's one specific person I would necessarily go to about this specifically. But if I had, I can guarantee that a lot of my elder generation in my family would probably have said, don't talk about it. You've told someone, now leave it. You know, they say leave the past in the past because otherwise it follows you. I don't think I necessarily agree with that. No matter whether you talk about it or you don't talk about it, for people like you and I, it will always be with us. I don't think I agree with the fact that you tell one person and then it's brushed under the carpet. Absolutely not. Like, nor do I think that's okay. But I do think talking about it makes other people aware. And if there is already people who are probably listening to this podcast or people that maybe even older than us, especially in my culture and my religion, that haven't come forward, it is okay to come forward. It is okay to break your silence, not still be sitting in fear, because the only person you're ultimately damaging and hurting is yourself.
Thank you for sharing that advice. I think that's going to, if people are listening, hopefully help. And it's also, that reflects on everyone and anyone. Don't stay silent, come forward and speak up. I just want to also go on to a little bit more about the spaces in your faith. So what do you wish faith leaders or cultural communities understood about sexual assault and adult survivors and child sexual abuse? What do you wish that they could do, or I suppose understand it?
I think if I was to look at it from my religious background aspect, you know how you have like people go to clubs for like singing or dancing and stuff like this. I really do feel that maybe there could be halls that are opened up that people meet with once a week. And if I'm sure each person on this planet has experienced something similar to the next. Not everyone the same, but they have. And I just think, having like an evening where you go into a hall to speak about how you feel, to at least be heard. Whether you then choose to go back to another session, that's on that person individually. But again, holding a safe space. And, in Asian culture, whether that is, I mean, I know for me personally, like if I was to go to the temple, I also find that a safe space. It's calm.
Mm.
It's a place where I can gather my thoughts. And that I feel like there should be a lot more spaces for people who wanna express their feelings, but are probably scared to express their feelings.
I was going to say, would you then, in terms of faith leaders and cultural communities, would you say specifically for the Asian community, that would be something that you would want? So would it be something at a temple, or would it be somewhere, where would you want that to be?
I think it would probably be like, you can like how you can hire halls for
Mhm.
potentially in a hall where you have these flyers of saying this is a safe space for women. But people also need to remember it's not just women these things happen to. There are also men that it's happened to, unfortunately. And maybe you could have a mixed group. Maybe you have a women only group and a men only group. And I think, especially in my culture, that probably is better having a women only group and a men only group. But you should go to these things. You should offload your feelings, your thoughts, and you should validate your feelings. It's not a place where you're going to get judged. It's a place where people are all in the same boat. They know what it feels like. They want to be heard and they want to be understood.
I think that could work. is whether, because I was thinking about doing something similar, setting up a community and bringing people together and having, it's not like an AA meeting, but that's where I'm going with it, where you have coffee and tea and people sit down and they talk, and it's just a safe space to not feel like you're alone and you're not the only one. It's just trying to figure out how that would work and if people would actually show up, because it's a scary thing to do. But then the first AA meeting, probably there was no one that showed up, and then it's got bigger and bigger. So I think that's a great idea, and it's something that I've been thinking about as well. So what do you think needs to change within the Asian community and the faith that you're in, that's silence is no longer mistaken for virtue? What do you think needs to be changed? Do you think it's just a case of we all come together and we speak up, and there needs to be more of people speaking up about it and talking about it? But what do you think? What is there any other changes that you think needs to happen?
Yeah, I definitely think it's that people should come forward, they should speak about it. And the more women of Asian society that do this, the easier it is for those women that are actually petrified going, should I speak out? Should I not? Do I go to this meeting? Do I not go to it?
Yeah.
It's they make it easier for them because they see these people are all doing it because they're finding it to be the normal thing to do, the normal thing for your voice to be heard. It doesn't mean that you completely disrespect the older generation's viewpoint. Again, coming from our generation, people's voices need to be heard, seen, and they need to be understood. And I do genuinely think that our generation downwards are gonna be the generation that do that, where they make it normal for situations to be spoken about openly. There shouldn't be things such as taboo, like, why? Why is it there? Because someone once has started a conversation and they said, "Actually, no, you shouldn't speak about it," and then that's how it people
Mm,
doesn't work like that.
no. I think you're so right. And it goes down to what you're doing today. You are here on this podcast and you are representing the Asian community and the Asian girls that this has happened to. And I really hope that, or also just people of any culture or any religion, you're sitting here and you're telling your story, and you have been incredibly brave today. And I hope you know that without sounding incredibly patronizing. You're so brave to be on this podcast, to be sharing your story, that first person that's taking that step to speaking out. And I think hopefully people are going to see this today and go, okay, she can do it, then I can do it. And that's all it is, really, isn't it? It's just seeing that one person, if they can speak up about what happened to them, then maybe I can. And it's then a whole cycle. And I hope that's what's going to happen today.
I think it also comes from a self-belief to some extent. Like, you have to believe in yourself that you are okay to do this, you are okay to step forward. It takes a lot of bravery and it takes a lot of courage, like a lot of courage.
Yeah, it does. It does. But people can get there because we're here and we're doing it. And it does take a lot of bravery and a lot of courage. And like I was saying, without sounding patronizing, but you being on this podcast is a very brave and courageous thing to do. And I'm very grateful for you being on here today and sharing your story. And it's been really lovely speaking to you. And I know, I'm not saying I really hope, I know it's going to help people. And that's ultimately why we do it, and why I'm doing this podcast is to help other people that are out there. Even if it just helps one person, two people, it's something, isn't it? I've got one last question, if that's okay. If someone that's listening has experienced sexual assault, sexual abuse as an adult, especially within faith and cultural spaces, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that, please, if you're listening to this podcast, do not be afraid. Come forward, make sure you are heard, make sure you are seen, and make sure you are understood. Do not brush it under the carpet, because otherwise you will have years and years of trauma carrying with you. You will not be able to move forward in the way that you might necessarily want to. If just maybe call a helpline, call someone, go online. There's so many help websites out there. You can be anonymous if you want to for now, but at least go and take that next step, because the sooner we try and, as much as we can, stop these men from doing what they're doing, it might never stop. I don't think it ever will. but we need to show these men we are not afraid of them. And if anything, they should be afraid of us.
I think that's beautifully put. Absolutely. They should be afraid of us. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a lovely statement, Anjali. And yeah, I think you've said it perfectly. I don't need to reiterate any of it because it was wonderfully put. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you today. Honestly, it's been so nice. And I'm so glad we managed to catch up and get this in. And I hope it's been a nice healing part for you as well, because this can be quite a triggering thing to do, to come on and talk about everything. So I really hope that you take away positives from it and you go and get a lot of self-care today and you relax, and you need to be very aware of yourself today, and I hope that you're going to be all right. But yeah, I just thank you so much for speaking so honestly and openly, and these conversations aren't easy. Your voice matters, you matter. And to anyone listening as well, your voice matters, you matter. And very importantly as well, you were saying about the websites and the numbers that you can call if you're listening and anything has been brought up for you. There is support available. There's so much, and I will put it at the end of the podcast as well, with all the numbers and support that you can reach out to people. You can be anonymous. You don't have to say your name, but just speaking to someone will help. So yeah, thank you, Anjali. Have you got any... Oh, your cat's back. Have you got any last words that you'd like to say before we end?
Know that just be proud of you and don't let anyone take away, belittle your worth, because you should know your worth. And just because someone thinks that they can snatch that from you doesn't make you any less of a person either.
Yeah. Thank you, Anjali. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And yeah, I hopefully speak to you soon. Thank you so much.
For having me on your podcast.
You're very welcome.